Good
Okay.
afternoon, everyone, on this bright sunny day. Um, I'm certainly envious that I have to be inside right now, so maybe we'll be able to make this meeting fairly quick. Um, I just want to start by seeking approval for the May minutes. Tara did put them in the chat. So do we have a motion to approve?
I wasn't here, so I can't approve. Sorry.
So moved.
Thank you. Was that you, Carol?
That was
It
me,
was
Jessica.
Jessica.
Jessica, thank you. Um, and do I have a second?
I said I wasn't here in May, so I can't
Now I
approve.
got it. You and Jessica, like Jessica raised her hand at the time, and I was like trying to figure
Sorry.
out who was saying what.
Kim, I think you can make a motion and Jessica, we'll put Jessica as the second.
Perfect. I will
Understood that
second
way.
it. That
Okay.
will work. Thank you very much, Tara. Okay. Tara, did we have any new policy suggestions from the online form?
No.
Thank you. So the main meat of what we'll talk about today is really setting forth our 2027 legislative priorities. I'll just remind you of the ones that are already on the docket, if you will, of things that we've been saying all along. One is, trying to get change in legislation for that insurance to cover behavior supports. As you know, it was approved for private insurance only to age 26. We'd like to get the age cap removed entirely, and we would like to see that Medicaid is part of the process and not just private insurance. So that's agenda one. Agenda two is to really advocate for the rates for our providers to be really reviewed and put in a process in place that will be more sensitive to changes as they come along. So not having to necessarily wait as long for rate approval changes. And then agenda three is specifically looking at how we can improve specifically to mental health providers their knowledge set, and skill set to working with individuals on the spectrum. Did I leave anything out, Tara?
No, that was the three main priorities: workforce, provider rates, and then insurance.
Thank you. And I'll just also remind people that we are working to get the needs assessment done. It's in process. It's just moving a little bit on the slow side right now. And Tara, I don't know if you have an update for us on that.
I did meet with DSS. They have a lot of competing contracts that have a June 1st deadline. So ours got kind of paused, but it is priority number one. So we should have something in July.
Awesome. Great news. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So at that note, I would like to open it to conversations around, the three known priorities. Are they still working for us? And are there any other priorities that we would like to start considering?
Are we not doing anything about the changing the waiver program a little bit so that maybe looking at a tiered system, is that not what we're looking at anymore?
Yeah, no, that's still very much in the works in terms of conversations. It has not been necessarily formalized by this committee as a priority. Some of the things that are kind of like I I want to say are like sort of in advance of that conversation is, as you're aware, there was legislation this past session to talk about changes in the definition, which would impact our young adults, in the sense that the changes in the definition were looking to say that developmental delay did not any longer have an IQ attached to it. And it would open the door for greater conversations around that needs. But there is a lot of systemic things behind that, which includes then what is the definition, who is eligible for DDS, who is not, how does that impact the current autism waiver? So all of those things are in play, Carol. However, I think we're still very much, first of all, I think we're overwhelmingly as a committee in favor of some of these changes, but we want to make sure that they are happening in the right order and to the degree that they could be the most beneficial for the individuals that we represent. Tara, do you have anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I just think that there's three. It's that DDS will be putting out a plan. So we don't know what that change will look like. They were just statutorily obligated to submit a plan. So that would be number one. And then on changing, and specifically, Krista, correct me if it's wrong, but it's specifically on changing and updating the definition of intellectual disability. So what we were going to look at is how the or wanted to make sure that the group discussions were making sure that the folks who have an IQ over 70, who have been waiting on the autism wait list, may have consideration as if, when that whatever happens and what that plan suggests, what's the impact to the autism waiver. So that's number one. Second is the needs assessment and what that comes back as far as saying how the waiver needs to change to meet current needs, because the needs assessment was specific to um the it was meant to use that data for the long-term planning and supports. So we really wanted to, before any waiver changes were made, that data should be used to inform that process. That's how we got the grant. Um, and then third, DSS is also working on, they have a consultant that's going to be doing a look at the HCBS waivers in general. And so we'll want to see the information from that as well. So there's like several things that are happening that's going to inform, what we look at as a whole. So it's not that that conversation has stopped. It's just that we're waiting for some of that information to come out to
Oh,
inform next steps.
and thank you, Krista, for putting the exact lie in. That will be
Absolutely.
very helpful. Um, Krista, is there anything you would add to this conversation at this point that could be helpful for us?
No, I think, Tara, obviously you summarize sort of what the legislation talks about and what the focus is going to be, not only from DDS, but from a DSS perspective as well. I think the one piece that I will just mention is that the legislation does ask the department to also identify the cost associated with any changes to standardizing the definition of intellectual disability. So the department is going to be looking at, obviously, what the fiscal impact is going to be to that. And I think that this group has talked about that prior, but it is something that the department has some concerns about. I think it was articulated in our testimony, and just trying to understand sort of downstream effects of expanding the definition. So that is going to be something that we're going to be looking at in terms of articulating what that means and putting that in the recommendation in the report. And then it does need to go through the committees of cognizance for review. So wanted to mention that as well, because that always allows an opportunity for public input and comment as well.
Which where as a committee, we want to be sure that we are actively involved in that piece of the process.
Absolutely, which is why I wanted to make sure that it is articulated. I believe the report would be due, I think it's July 1, 2027.
Okay.
Put a little asterisk next to that. Yep, it's not later than July 1, 2027 is when we have to file the report with the committees. So sometime post that date will be the opportunity, usually for some public input of some kind through the legislature.
And Carol, I don't want to speak for you, but we have had multiple conversations around really ultimately on the long end of this, we're looking to try to find a much more sensitive scale to address what people need versus trying to fit everything into this structure where people might actually get more than they need, where others are not getting enough of what they need. Carol, did you want to add to that piece of it?
No, I think I just kind of trying to be the squeaky wheel. It says there's a
Mhm.
lot of people, there's only so many slots on the waiver, and we have people who are sitting there with a $50,000 slot and using 1 hour of services a month. And so to me, that's just not a good use of time, and not a and we have other people who are at the cap of their 50,000, and those are the guys that I think we would like to see maybe move over to DDS because they have, while their IQ might be higher, their functional level is just not able to be as independent as they would be, So, but I think that I know that there's a huge waiting list for the autism division, and there's a lot of people not using what they
Mhm.
get.
And that
So,
was part of the DSS update in the our last full council meeting, was looking at not only that, but also the onboarding and the loss of providers that we've had is also impacting utilization. And if rates were to increase, we may also have to reconsider the cap because you do have people already at the highest level and you have people who are underutilizing. So the the kind of fear right now is that we still have waiver slots available and they are actively working to onboard additional people. The problem is, are they going to be able to have the services and the providers because of the, some of the rate disparities? So there's only two services in the autism waiver that are attached to minimum wage that get updates based on cost of living. So the rest of those rates have not been adjusted since 2013. So that's kind of compressing all of those other services. And, you know, that's the reason providers have given as to why they're leaving the program.
Thank you, Carol, for bringing that up. I'm really glad that, it is front and center. And I think we're kind of at a point where we're just going to at a wait and see. And as we need to put voice more to this, we certainly will as a group. What other agenda items or priorities are people interested in talking about?
In the housing, this is Toby. Sorry, let me just go on camera here. In the housing group, the housing topic has so many different elements to it. It's both the support, it's the construction, it's the, accessibility, all of those things. And we anticipate that it will intersect with members of the housing policy group, that the broader, what is the name of it, Tara? It's a legislative housing group, correct?
There is a housing committee as part of the that looks at a lot of that. Is that what you're
Right.
referring to?
Well, I'm saying like our housing subcommittee is interested in supporting supportive housing, but we know that there are other legislative committees specific to housing that we would want input from. So
Hmm.
we're not in a place right now to articulate anything in particular other than knowing that there is need out there now and wanting to do some work in that area with developing relationships with people on that committee to support our committee in this particular coalition. So nothing tangible in the form of policy per se or legislative priority other than the need and helping to inform the need. Not waiting for the needs assessment because we're going to do some other survey work, but obviously leveraging whatever we can in that needs assessment when it comes out.
And Toby, you're kind of touching upon, our last agenda item for today as well, is the idea that we need to position ourselves for different partnerships and different collaborations.
Hmm.
And that was also going to be an open conversation to talk about, well, who do we need to be talking to? For example, the DD Council is a council that I think we need to be, you know, in good communication with and partnering with. And I agree with you. It makes sense to be doing the same around housing. And when the housing committee is finalized with where they need to go, then this committee most certainly need to be brought into play to help organize and support that. So please know that we're ready whenever you are as a group.
Thank you.
Kim, I think the other one that we've talked about and that we haven't discussed in the larger group, I think, is, and I didn't know if you wanted to bring it up as another option, is transportation.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes. I would love to find out from, you know, from the members of this group, thoughts on transportation. Um, you know, I'm running into personally and professionally issues around how disjointed transportation really is. And for those individuals who can work, but now can't get to and from work, and that's just work, but we have, you know, certainly medical appointments and social engagements. You know, I'm finding, for example, the River Valley Transit is fairly solid, some breakdown areas, but fairly solid. But then the Hartford region is not as robust. And I don't mean Hartford proper, I mean the outskirts as well. So it's very interesting how it is developing. And I'm hoping that more information will come to light out of the needs assessment, Tara, because I suspect that's going to be a top issue. Reactions to thoughts around transportation?
It's the perpetual issue in every state and every location, really. And, I just think of sort of the definite gaps that we have in the long waiting list for people. The same issue is true, not just for transportation, but transition and employment supports in absence of a waiver. I mean, it doesn't mean that people's lives stop. I mean, it can. It can mean they're on their parents' couch without the support, but we definitely need to focus on employment and transition for people who don't have access to waivers. It has to be, I mean, VR has a role to play. I know VR is in the call, but I mean, we need to think about that. People can't wait until they're, 35 before they get a job, you
That's
know.
right. Mhm. Other thoughts, comments, reactions?
In terms of transportation, the rural parts of the state are just, they might not even have the option of Uber or Lyft or a
Yeah,
taxi. It's a real struggle. And if you're nowhere near a regular bus line, 88 transportation's not an option. So, yeah, it's tricky.
yeah, it sure is. And I think even if there is an Uber or Lyft, the other issue that gets run to is often employment is at a minimum wage, and therefore mathematically it actually costs you more to get to work than it does than you would earn. And
Yep.
so I think those issues of making accessible and affordable transportation that's also reliable, because paratransit it's a great tool, don't get me wrong, but it's not always 100% reliable. Like they can't always be there all the time. Like there are times where it's not running. There are times where you have to have like as much as an hour window.
Yeah.
And if you have to show up to work at a certain time, that could be a challenge. Mhm.
Yep. Agreed.
Would the group agree that transportation is something that we should explore?
I think,
Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
yes.
Okay. Then we can certainly list it as one of our priorities and do some more homework behind it in terms of Tara, is there somebody that could come in and, do some presentation? I don't know who that would be, but like where do we go? And knowing too, like the multiple options that are available for transportation currently, I think would be really helpful because there is a whole litany available. It's just who qualifies for what and in what region and for what purpose, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I'm happy to reach out and help facilitate any conversations if you have anyone in specific in mind. But I will also note, I know that there was some funding for, and it's only, I think, for certain areas, but the micro transit, and I'll have to look into that a little more. I do not know much about that program, but um, considering there was new funding for some locations in the state for that, maybe we could reach out to whoever's working on that project in the state and see if how that would intersect with people with disabilities, and or autism to see, what may be available. Also, the I know there was a study done. Krista, you're nodding. It was 2 years ago, last year or 2 years ago, and it was specific for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the the big thing that came out of that was there needs to be additional work to look at that issue. But if I can get my hands on that report, I can send it out to you guys so you could at least take a look at it and see what their findings were and what the recommendations are, just as a starting point. Like I said, I don't think it was anything astronomical. I think it was just more like we need more studies on this, but it at least gives you a summary of what's currently happening. So I will try to dig that report up as well.
I was on that equity task force for the
Okay, good.
transportation committee. Yeah,
Do you have a copy of the report?
I do. I
Oh, okay,
do.
great.
I'll get it.
Okay.
But basically it's pretty much the downtown areas of Hartford. It
Oh,
was
so they
Mike,
weren't looking at.
it wasn't
Okay.
statewide, but it was micro transit and ride sharing and um, some more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even, I couldn't even attend the last meeting, but
Okay.
there was a survey done. I don't even know how many respondents they got. I just couldn't, I had a conflict, but I'll get the study.
Okay.
And I don't even know what their final set of recommendations were, but I would
Okay.
say they did not, just being fair. I know they wanted to make sure people with disabilities were included in the study, but it wasn't exclusive to people with disabilities. And I would say probably more could have been done in that area.
Okay.
But
I
I'll
thought
send
it
the report.
was.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I
Thank you,
appreciate that.
Toby.
And
Hmm.
And then the other thing that we would need to look at too is I don't know, to Jessica's point, I don't know if there was anything in the rural health grant that um would be related to transportation, but I can double check that as well just to see if there is any overlap.
That would be helpful.
And Tara, I just want to mention, I do think that there was another transportation report, working group slash report that came out of legislation last year, I believe, that focused on providing accessible transportation for individuals living in the Northeast corner. That was
Okay.
actually the report I was looking for as we started the conversation. So I can dive into that as well. I do believe that there's also been several sort of like one pager fact sheets that have come out of the Office of Legislative Research, OLR,
Mhm.
on transportation options for individuals with disabilities. Um, I think that might be a good place to start the conversation, sort of looking at all of the different research and all of the different findings that have come from those conversations. I can try to pull up some of those and send them over to you, Tara, to share with the group as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you,
Yes.
Krista. Other thoughts or comments around transportation? Great. So Tara and I will work together to, to see if we can get some individuals to come in and help educate us a little bit more. And we'll start shaping, really, ultimately, all these things we need to be able to shape the ask. And so it's having enough knowledge to do that.
I think another good thing to that point would be to maybe look at developing a, quick little elevator pitch, so to speak, on our priorities, like for the insurance, the autism provider rates, and the workforce and what we would like to see. And we could put those in our share drive.
I love it.
And that way, if people are talking to their local legislators, I mean, this is a big election year. So, as you're, you would have people, members could have access to that, if you wanted to have those conversations.
I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So we can work on getting that in there too. And then I can add whatever resources I get, I'll add to that drive as well. I'll send you all a link, so you can have access to that.
Thank you. Are there any other priority topic areas that the committee would like to bring up? All right, so I'm going to shift gears because our second bullet on our agenda is to talk about who do we need to collaborate with? Where do we need to go? Obviously, we want to highlight collaboration areas for the topics we just brought up, but this really could be for, just any partnership that you feel would be helpful for us. Toby, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I tried to say something, but I was on mute. I mean, are people willing to consider the employment piece or transition piece?
Oh, yeah,
Because we talked about transition, but not the employment piece as a group.
yeah, talk more about that, Toby. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, we spend so much time supporting kids and school systems to create measurable post-secondary goals as part of their planning process, right? And then, sometimes that comes to a halt when they're leaving school because they lack access to waivered services after they leave school. So I mean, I really think we know that there are all kinds of problems with challenges associated with the IQ score being the the indicator right now for eligibility, which is why there's so much discussion about considering other functional and adaptive behavioral issues and other things to help round out that definition of eligibility that many other states in the country use, using things like support intensity index and other kinds of measures. But in the meantime, like I said, people can't wait till they're 35 before they can look for work. And we know that vocational rehabilitation is a resource. We know that people, there are some people that are just going to persist and their families are going to help them. But in the meantime, there are a lot of other people that are just lacking opportunity. So to the extent that we can put some momentum around other sorts of resources somehow for people to have the opportunity on some level to pursue employment and keep, I mean, think of the lack of the opportunity cost on all that investment that happens while they're in school. And even if we get insurance extended to, provide for the things that we're already past this session and we're going to focus on next session, people still need an opportunity to work and earn an income.
Mm-hmm.
And some populations are also going to be pressed for mandated work reporting in terms of Medicaid eligibility. So we haven't talked about that either, and we should. It's all connected. So I'll just leave it at that. I think we all know what the challenges are. People just need more access to employment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Toby. Other common areas on that with employment? I don't know if Jessica, you wanted to add some thoughts.
I mean, I certainly don't disagree. We certainly have over the last few years really made a concerted effort and to focus more of our time and staffing and monies on transition aged youth, trying to avoid the scenario that Toby presents where we end up with somebody who's 35 who has never worked, who's coming to us for the first time in VR. I mean, the whole idea is if we can work effectively with these young people to help get them sort of launched into work and successful work, then they're not going to need to come back to us at age 35. Obviously, things change or whatever, but theoretically, that's the idea. But, we're limited in terms of how much support we can provide and in terms of how long we can provide it. So I agree there needs to be more, not just sort of opportunity, but we run into an issue when somebody needs some ongoing supports. We've kind of come to the end of our short-term time frame, but the waiver has not, they're still on the waiting list for the waiver. And that, we have there's some new supported employment funds, but those are limited up to, a certain age. And then we get stuck in this kind of gap, and we have to talk to families about, are you able to help provide supports? Do we look at work incentives from Social Security? But it's never ideal, for sure. So I agree that there is, we need more to sort of beef up the supports around young people and more opportunities so that they can, participate in training or whatever it is they want to do, schooling, etc., and then working and being as independent as possible.
Jessica, well, not to put you on the spot, but what do you think are some of the greatest barriers that prevent someone from becoming employed?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, since we just talked about transportation, I will say that is an ongoing issue where we have individuals who are, ready to work. There are jobs available, but we can't connect the two of them. But, if we're talking specifically with individuals, with ASD, it's really a matter of supports and increasing independence and helping, for young people at least, helping parents understand sort of how do they support that? How do we support families as they're trying to help their young adults, launch? Behaviorists is sometimes a thing, and we in VR have recently been able to start bringing on some vendors for individuals where it becomes clear that, okay, they can work. We know they can work. There's a few things that are interfering. That can we address those? Can we get them taken care of so they're good to go? So that's a fairly new thing for us, which I'm very excited about. But again, anything that's long term or considered an ongoing need for someone, we're going to get stuck unless we know where that's coming from. So that is always a challenge for us, regardless of disability. We will do what we can up to a certain point, and then we have to know that we're not going to put somebody, help them find a job, and then when we're needing to kind of wrap things up, we're setting them up to fail because there's not the sort of supports and safety net that they need to continue to be successful. So that's always been a bit of a challenge for us. And we have some funding for ongoing supports, but it's pretty limited. And it's pretty specific in terms of somebody cannot be eligible for anything else in order for those ongoing support funds to be utilized.
Is it eligible? Like they can't be eligible for anything else, or they can't be, so it's
Eligible.
like even if they're on the wait list, for example,
Eligible.
that would disqualify them. Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty specific in terms of the funding. So
How do we do as a state, and I'm asking because I've only lived here for a year, how do we do as a state with discovery at a young age so that we're not waiting until the student is, 18 or 19 or 22 before they leave high school to really start discovery? I mean, I know that we have Level Up and we have some other programs, but all the evidence base talks about early exposure as early as possible. So the student is accumulating knowledge about themselves, knowledge about their interests, knowledge about, career pathways. And how do we do as a state while the student is in middle school and early high school years to inform the program of study so that they know what they want to do by the time they're going to separate from high school? Because I think that would really help inform the pipeline for future careers, that the student might want to go after. I mean, I know we want to be person-centered and whole life and perspective, but from the standpoint of, just think about the AI and all the advantages and disadvantages of that. But I mean, the scientific mind of so many of these students, and I know that there are some international models for the IT industry that people with autism are going into, where they're being trained and they land competitive full-time positions. So I think we need to be looking at the trajectory from when the kid is in middle school and informing them earlier so they have some hands-on real life experience that allows them to discover themselves in that.
Yeah, good point, Toby. Tara, I see you have your hand up.
Well, I didn't know if Jessica had anything to respond to that. If you wanted to respond to the what are we doing? How are we doing as a state for transition?
Well, I also was going to
Is
invite
there,
Brian. Yeah, if Brian had commentary as
because I
well.
know there's several programs that are
Mhm.
occurring for that, but for that discovery, I'll let you answer first.
I was just gonna add, we do have a fairly new program that's the Bridge grant, we're calling it, where there is an effort really being made to reach down to younger students in that age group. I'm not as involved in that as some other folks, but if you would be interested in me getting more information about how that's going up to this point, I'd be happy to do that to share with the group. Because I agree we need to get to students, at a younger age, even just talking about work, because if for students that have significant disabilities, sometimes that's just not part of the conversation, even from the time they're in elementary school. But so just work in general, but then also, learning all the things they need to learn about themselves and the world of work and that connection and what do they need to do to be, you know, able to advocate for themselves and all of those things so they have goals when they're exiting high school that everybody's on the same page with. So I'd be happy to get more information about Bridge and how things are going up to this point, and then share that with the group, or even have one of our staff who's really involved with it come speak to the larger group or this group, whatever would be helpful.
Thank you, Jessica. I think that would be helpful to have someone come and speak to us about it. And in lieu of getting someone, if you could bring forward the information, we could start with this group,
Okay,
and then we could decide if we want to do the larger group.
sure.
Christine, I see your hand up.
Yes, hi everyone. I just wanted to make a comment as a parent. So my son is going into high school next school year. We just went through the mapping program at our school. I'm in Watertown, and I'm also on the Board of Education in Watertown as well. So I believe our district does a very good job of, as they're going into the high school, and let's talk about mapping, let's talk like get the transition discussion going, right? So I think it really depends on the district and what they're offering on, you talk about a granular level and what is available and what the districts are able to do, and honestly, it also comes down to parent as an advocate, right? So this was something that we pushed very hard for to see what is his path going into high school and beyond. And the session that we did was phenomenal. I mean, that was our experience of it all. And I have a couple other parents that are friends in the district. Our kids are also going on into the high school. They went through the mapping program. So there's ways of doing it. And it's just if everyone is being as consistent as they can be. And I think that's the greater question. And as a parent, I'm a staunch advocate for my child. And not every parent, it's not I say ignorance, but I don't mean that in a derogatory way, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. It's asking the right questions and what, those types of things. And I know from the back end of it, districts are also very strapped for all the things that they really should be doing and could be doing. And I think everyone tries to do the very best they can. But again, I think if there's more definitive protocols in place to do these things, it would really make a difference as we move forward. So that was just my comment on that.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Christine. I think that is important to know, like, that districts do provide these things. I agree with you. My experience has been it could be of varying degrees in terms of resources and knowledge, I would add.
Yes.
And so I don't think there's anything that we could say is uniformly happening, but as the requirements of the law are such under IDEA and the Connecticut emphasis on age 14 and higher, I do think
Mhm.
districts are making better and better attempts at really thinking about
Absolutely.
this.
Absolutely. And I think if a district has a nice, robust transition program, that also matters. So Watertown also, and I'm not, this isn't a Watertown, I'm not trying to pump up Watertown by any means to everybody. They've done a really great job and are really trying to be a bit forward thinking, but their transition department also did a wonderful presentation and had DSS and DDS come in and all of the alphabet soup is as it's called, come in and do some presentations for the kids going into high school and then beyond, just to kind of see the lay of the land moving forward. And if you have districts that are being that proactive, that really, really matters as we, get to the, as we say, there's no IEP after age 22. So what are we doing at that point? And what is the plan at that point for our child or young adult? So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Tara, you had something you'd like to add?
Yes, and I 100% agree with you, Christine, and I just want to add, two additional secondary gaps that I've been hearing as of late. One is those kids who may not qualify for special education. So those kids with you know, a higher level of autism that doesn't require them to be in special education, but then what do those services look like for them? So just to piggyback off of that, because are they getting those same kinds of supports and mapping into the next steps as the kids who are receiving special education transition? So that's the first one. The other one that I want to make sure we're not forgetting is that I'm hearing a lot about is the secondary gap after college. So I'm hearing about a lot about how young adults are making that transition to college and are successfully going through school and that continuing education piece, but then are really struggling when they transition out of college into the workforce. And so, just wanted to bring that up as well, that, in the absence of, that's where I've heard a lot of families are really stuck. So now the college, ex-college student here, they have a degree, made it through school, and are now living in mom and dad's basement. And the longer that that goes on without those additional supports and services. So that's another area that I'm very interested in personally, at looking at how we can help with that secondary transition for those young adults who have successfully gone through school. So I'll stop talking. Sorry. Just one.
No, both great points. Thank you, Tara, because we often forget not all individuals with autism qualify for special ed, and special ed is a key tool to protecting what we're talking about. And you're not wrong. I also have heard about that gap of could do school really well, but now I'm out of college and getting to that next layer. I wanted to not to call him on the spot, but give Brian an opportunity if he had something he wanted to add around transition planning at middle school and high school. I'm going to assume Brian is tied up. And Toby, I see you have your hand here.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to be talking so much. It's just an area that I'm really familiar with. I just on the note of the secondary transition, it's very common for colleges to have a lot of challenges, their ADA coordinating offices to report out that the persistence and just isolation on college campuses, various things like that, college persistence can be very difficult for people with autism and people on the spectrum. I mean, I just think it's an area we need to dive into deeper, because, although this group, and I wouldn't say that people have to qualify for special education to make the leap to college. They may or may not qualify for special education, but in high school or younger years, but it can be a big challenge when they're just focused on the ADA accommodations in the college environment. It can be very challenging. But I think it would be great to have more information, maybe have some of the colleges not report, but present on this topic, to this group to like hear from them about what some of the challenges are. They'd be really good key informants to help us better understand some of those challenges, both in college and after college life, along with families and individuals.
Yeah, I agree, Toby. Um there has been some work done around the state around specifically students on the spectrum and centers that have been opened up to just really support them. I haven't really kept up that end of things personally, so it'd be good to kind of get an update on how that is happening and where that is happening, and where there may be gaps. Carol, I see your hand.
Yeah, personally, I would be very interested if we could have somebody coming to talk to us about that, because my own personal experience is that I have a child on the spectrum who just graduated from college with a great GPA and is sitting on my couch and doesn't, everything has fallen off. Like it's like the structure isn't there anymore. And so it's just, and he's got a mom who I think knows what they're doing a little bit, but it's really challenging because their whole lives have been structured up until this point. My child was on a 504, and then they graduate and everyone says, "Good job," and then you're off, and that's it. So I would really be very interested if we had somebody to come and talk about that stuff.
Yeah, I was just looking her up. We do have a local expert on the very subject, but I don't know if she's out and about and doing things anymore. Um, uh, Jane Fairfield Brown, has done a tremendous amount of work in the state around this very exact subject, but I have not kept in touch with her recently, so I have no idea what her availability is at this point, but we can look into that. Jessica?
That was my thought too, was Jane. I'm still in contact with her and I could find out if she'd be available, willing to come talk to us. I think she'd be great. And I think
Yeah.
the other piece to this that's important, that we talk about is, I mean, part of it's the labor market situation, and just, um, but we talk a lot about the work experience piece, so it sort of goes back to transition, where, you know, the having the sort of foundational work skills in addition to the degree is important. But then also we if somebody has a particular interest, a particular degree, spending time with that, talking about what kind of work does that degree sort of lend itself to. And despite doing all that, we still end up with situations where students graduate, they did really well in school, and so then it's how, yeah, the job search, it's a challenge. So and I know because, my own experience with one of my kids in terms of getting a degree, and now, she's doing something else for work while she's hoping to get into her field. Um, but I just wanted to mention that, and then I will reach out to Jane and find out. And again,
I would love
coming
that.
here to talk to this group or talking to the larger group.
I would love to have Jane come talk to us if you can,
Okay.
and we could find out what works best for her. But she's a prolific speaker, and she is so knowledgeable on this very subject. So it'd be wonderful to get the expert into the room. And Brian, I see that you can finally join us. Did you would like to add to this conversation?
Sorry, Kim, was there a specific info that you wanted me to join in? I apologize. I was unable to unmute at the time.
No
I heard
worries,
you
no
say
worries.
talk about secondary transition programs at the middle school level.
Yeah, I think just giving a 60,000 foot view of like some of the things are happening in schools. Specifically, the question came up around what are we doing around discovery and exploration from middle school on up to really get students ready for work.
Yeah, so the process can start earlier than 18, but that's in schools kicks in. So, we encourage planning and placement teams to consider even earlier on for students. And within the IEP process, what that means for students is that there's a transition, assessment or needs assessment that's done initially, and then again on an annual basis to understand from the student's perspective and the family's perspective what their goals and or vision is. And then the IEP team would then design both a post-secondary employment and post-secondary education goal related to that. We also have built in the post-secondary goal outcome statements, which are designed to kind of in the future state what the student would be doing once they transition to adulthood from the oversight of the school and the school system. I heard someone mention paths and maps as a really productive process, but also an intense one as far as sort of the the amount of individuals surrounding the student involved in those discussions and those activities, which are extremely valuable. We receive positive feedback on that. We collaborate with CERC and the RESC Alliance to support those processes. There's been a lot of legislative activity, I would say, related to secondary transition recently. And those updates have all been added to our transition bill of rights for parents and families, which is required. We still hear from parents and or CPAC that parents aren't aware of that document. And so we keep, kind of sharing that out and thinking about different ways. And there's also been a tremendous amount of interagency work recently around informed decision making, which was a collaborative effort with the disability rights as well as other advocate entities to ensure that parents and families have access to that information, which is also linked to the Transition Bill of Rights. But sorry, I hope that I don't know if that was too high or not high enough as
No,
far as a perspective, but we in any way we can support, we're happy to do so.
thank you, Brian. It's very appreciated. Christine, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment. I had a random thought. The rest, like at Advance, they have a really wonderful program at Post University. It's their University Pathways program. And it just led me to think, and I know some of the ladies that work there as well, it just led me to think like that's working with the rests in such a way I think could be a great opportunity when you speak to, the needs after age 22 and what we're doing and what happens after. And I don't know if that's something that can be, discussed. I mean, everything is funding, right? So that's a whole other piece of it. But I just felt the rests that are doing that type of work, it's a great opportunity to work within the college campuses to be like, what is the next step? What are we looking at? Is there, interning is always a difficult thing, but are there ways to do some of those activities so that the students that can go on to do some type of meaningful work and get them out there, get a foot in the door, I think that can make a real difference. And it's unfortunate the world we live in, all of our children, all of our everyone, they're all unique and their needs are all very unique. And the needs of one are very different from the needs of others. And sometimes the ones that appear to be, lower support needs, they're the ones that really need that support. So it's a very interesting dynamic as you dive into this and the needs of all of these individuals. I look at my son included. He's right smack in the middle of everything. He's on a life skills path right now, but making such great strides. So who knows what's going to happen in 4 years, 5 years? I mean, my dream is the University Pathways program, but from a parent perspective, we're doing everything we can to educate ourselves about what the opportunities and things are. And, I think we all have some opportunities, but I think as a group, what we're doing on this council in all of the great work that everyone is doing, I think making the information easy to access is the most important piece of it. And how do we get that information and communicate that to parents, caregivers, whatever it may be, so this information is out there. And that's the piece of it. We could have all the greatest programs in the world, but if parents don't know about it, young adults don't know about it, caregivers don't know about it, that's the most important piece as well, besides having people to do the things. But I'm sorry, I went off on a little tangent there, but I feel like the rests are a good place to at least start some of those conversations as well. So thank you.
Yeah, Christine, thank you. Yeah, actually, there's also a new University Pathways program being opened up at Central. And they have
Nice,
one
nice.
also at Naugatuck Community College. So there are programs that are available. These are available for students, just to be clear, who are not yet 22 and are still
Yeah.
under the
Mhm,
school system, as opposed to some of the other things we were talking about, which is we are officially graduated from high school.
mhm. Well, and to that point, I think that's the place that how do we prepare for when we are out? And these are the steps as we talk about, you can start middle school, start all the way, but once we get to that point, I think it's a great opportunity to use those types of services to the best of their abilities to help
I
afterwards.
I
So,
agree. I agree.
Kim, are you saying that those are dual enrollment programs? The ones you just mentioned? It sounds like dual enrollment where they're
So yeah, technically, yes.
okay.
Technically they do work with the universities. They partner directly with the universities. They are still considered high school
Right.
students. They still have an
Yep.
IEP. They do, depending on the student's IEP, because there are some students who participate who actually don't take any courses at the college. They're doing other things on the college campus for the peer experience and
Right.
other things. But there are plenty, the most actually, I probably should say, who do take college classes. Um, they're either audited or for grade, and then it's worked out with the districts. The experience is really centered on those skills that help me become successful as a college student. But all of those programs also have a work component to them. So students do get an opportunity to experience vocational experiences along with that. So, but we could have, I'm not the expert on those programs. I just know enough to be dangerous. We can certainly have one of the individuals who runs those programs come in and speak to us in much more detail than I can provide.
That'd be great.
Brian, oh, thank you, Brian, for responding to Toby. There was some chat in there around indicator 13, and asking if that data, which is data that's collected annually, around student success with, transition, and, just kind of trying to quickly read, uh,
I could just jump in, just
apps. Go
letting,
ahead.
making sure folks had information related to those indicators. So there are two secondary transition. 13 is a compliance base, so we're looking for all those different things. And with the design of CT sets, a lot of those compliance based indicators are built in on the front end versus us going back to the districts and saying, hey, you didn't invite the student. So now we have addressed, some of those issues, although there are still districts that come up within that report. And then we also have the post-secondary survey, which is 1 year after the student graduates. We survey grad students who have exited public schools to see if they are employed, attending school, or both. So I can connect with the performance office to see if we can share information with this committee that would be helpful as well.
Thank you, Brian. Much better job than I was trying to do. All right. I just noticed the time. It is 2:59. This was fantastic conversation, and I really appreciate everybody's input. I'm gonna take this information and work with Tara to really find a way to pull it together, so that we have it codified and we can keep working from it. And then part of the agenda item that we really didn't get too deep on, but we can continue as we go through, is really who do we want to collaborate with? Where do we want to be active with our voices? Because we do have multiple opportunities to get our voice out there. So thank you very much, everyone. Please go outside and enjoy the day. Bye-bye.